Good evening, everybody. Let's see if we can gather everyone back. Dean, Bob, and everybody else kind of coming back this way. Let's see if this is better. Let me know if you can hear my audio and are picking up the video screen at this point. Everybody able to hear me? Everybody able to hear me? Curtis, I apologize. Well, everyone, I apologize. This is strange. Tim, you see? Okay, good. Can you hear me as well, Tim? Apologies. Okay, great. Well, let's proceed then. Hopefully we're able to capture everyone back. I apologize. We'll have to do another test of this another point. Best laid plans earlier today. We tried to test this out and it didn't have any issues, of course. So my apologies. I will make up for it hopefully with this beauty because I think this is gorgeous. I'm excited to get into the deep depth of this wine. So what do you see? We saw legs that formed fairly substantially. The tears are forming into legs that are holding, and they hold for a while. That's an indication that this wine has either some real ripeness by way of a warm climate, a warm vintage. Perhaps there's some residual sugar left in the wine, and as a result, it would have that sort of syrupy effect on the wine. I mean, the ridge of where this wine was swirled is still forming the tears. So there's some real viscosity. The color of this wine has that golden hue to it, which, well, there's some wonderful appley notes too. There's quite a bit coming exploding from the nose, as I noted at the beginning. That golden hue too indicates perhaps a real kind of sun-kissed skin, something that has some more richness to it. We can talk about certain varietals, of course. I apologize, Curtis. There must be some latency there too. Intermittent audio video. Technology. Let's proceed. If you can, let me know that you're sampling this wine and what you're smelling. Okay. Many apologies. You're having to make up for it on from my failing on my end. I apologize. All right. So from that standpoint, visually, we're looking at a ripe climate, warm wine that has maybe some residual sugar. We'll see as we taste this wine. Very few wines that we taste typically have that residual sugar, and if they do, it kind of tells us quite a bit. So we'll see. But that golden hue, right off the bat, there are grapes that pop out in one's mind from being a really rich kind of Chardonnay to being something like Chenin Blanc to Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, something that might see a little bit of botrytis, perhaps, or a late harvest orientation. All options at this point. So let's smell this wine and see what we smell. It's beautiful. We're always looking for a few things: fruit, earth, and wood. The fruit here is quite expressive. Yes, I smell from the fruit side. You're always looking for, is it tree fruit, apples and pears? Is it stone fruit, things with a pit inside of them, nectarines, apricots, things of that sort? Are you looking at berries, red berries, darker berries, blackberries, currants, things of that sort? Tropical fruit, any citrus, bananas, things of sometimes we have found pineapple, of course, in wine. That's a great tell if you see pineapple, for example, in Petit Manseng. So from that standpoint, what kind of fruit do you pick up in this wine? Earth can be anything from sort of a saddly leather to tobacco to kind of petrichor, or that smell of rain on rocks, mineral rocky smell. Is it forest floor, kind of something tree oriented? All of those things indicate a quality of earth. And then wood. Wood shows up in the form typically of spice. Sometimes it also comes in the form of like a little bit of a cedar note, sometimes a vanillin note, dill perhaps, and each one indicates a different expression of wood. Curtis, a lot of, not a whole lot of fruit, but a little bit of minerality. Sarah, thank you for finding your way back. Hopefully this is working for you. We're still kind of just needling through the nose here. Curtis and everyone else, on the nose, there's an apple-y quality to this to me, like from a yellow apple, kind of just fresh cut. There's a little bit of tropical note that Dean's picking up. All right. I think, yeah, there's an interesting quality of riper fruit, not super expressive. Yeah, it's not the most prominent fruit, but there's a quality of that sort of almost baked apple, slight tropical element. How about earthen notes? We've got a mineral note. What else? Anything else in that regard? So you're picking up a little herbal, huh? Yeah, if you push into the glass and kind of get a good sniff, there's a hint of it, and maybe that's an indication. There's sort of like this herbal element that you get from, say, a grassy herbal from Sauvignon Blanc, all the way to sort of that dill note that you might pick up from oak. It's subtle. It's kind of hidden there, and I'm not picking up in the way that you would pick up an overt, really powerful amount of Sauvignon Blanc grassiness. I'm not getting that kind of green pepper or chili pepper, jalapeno pepper kind of note that you might get on Sauvignon Blanc too. But there's some depth here, and it's starting to come out a little bit as it gets warmer. Sarah, thank you very much for that note, because that's where I was just headed to. Your note just popped up just as I said it. It absolutely is changing as it warms up, growing more expressive. The chill on it was kind of muting back some of the flavors. So let's taste the wine and see what we can learn about it from the taste vis-a-vis what it said on the palate. Because on the what it said on the nose and the visual. Ripe, we should be expecting ripeness. We should be expecting some weight and some viscosity. Looking at something that has maybe a little bit of that tropical flavor, a little bit more of an appley note. Just as we're kind of talking about those profiles, we talked about Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay, Petit Manseng for sure on the pineapple side of things. Anything else anybody else wants to add as you venture into your first tastes? That gravelly minerality is present in the middle of the palate. This is a weightier wine. I think it has a little bit higher alcohol. Unlike in reds, where you can kind of tilt the glass and sort of see, is there a watery meniscus? Sometimes you can pick that up in a white. It's a lot harder. And maybe there's a slight separation here that shows a little bit. It has a pretty good amount of acidity, though. Tim, don't be alarmed. You can have as many sips as you like. I tend to want to get into the visual and the actual nasal or smell sense of the wine first before I taste it, just because you can learn a lot about a wine before you're influenced by the taste. But have at it. This is meant to be fun and enjoyable, and drink as much as you like. Taste as much as you like either way. Underripe pineapple. Yeah, Curtis, for sure. So this wine, right, we thought about the viscosity because of the tears forming into some substantial legs, even taking a while for those tears to even form, indicating the potential for either some residual sugar or some richness and potentially higher alcohol by way of something quite ripe. So let's talk about residual sugar. You would find that on the back of the taste. So at the finish, the conclusion of your taste in your palate, is there anything lingering in the way of sweetness in this wine? No, I don't think so. For me, no. It's pretty close to bone dry with some good acidity. I agree, Lisa. It's definitely losing. It's not losing so much as it just continues to kind of maintain that muted fruit character, and you're getting more of other things, as well as it just sort of is a little bit warm. It's a bit hot. So taking something with this ripeness to dryness, when you have a little ball of acid that's a grape that grows up to be a ball of sugar with acid, that additional sugar that forms as the grape becomes riper is expressed as you eat the grape in sweetness. And as you're making a wine, it expresses in the form of fermentation by yeast eating that sugar and creating alcohol. And the more sugar the yeast has to eat, generally speaking, the higher the alcohol potential. And so you have a greater richness on the palate, because even 1 degree or 1% of alcohol difference can be really perceived in weight, in texture. Candy and Kathy, good evening to you. Welcome. We're tasting a more robust but dry white wine. It's dry. Dean, I want you to revisit the acid. You said it wasn't as acidic as you thought. Right now, for me, I've got a pool of saliva under my tongue. It's still going. It's still continuing. There's quite a bit of acidity. That's a good tell for a wine like this. There's a few grapes, generally speaking, that as they ripen, generally speaking, as a grape ripens, as that little ball of acid grows to the ball of sugar and acid, you diminish the acid as it's replaced by ripened sugar, right? The sugar character of the grape, or the sweetness in the grape. Few grapes, when they get more ripe, the acidity goes down. There's a few grapes that as they gain ripeness, the acidity also maintains and tracks as the grape continues to ripen. One of those grapes is Chenin Blanc. Another one's Petit Manseng. Another one could be Riesling. And you might have a blend that carries something with acidity and something that has less so, like a Semillon Sauvignon Blanc blend. I see Sauvignon Blanc and Chenin Blanc coming from South Africa from Candy, and I think Chenin Blanc from South Africa is an outstanding idea here. Can be a riper quality. We had a wonderful producer from Rimhoekte from South Africa that made a wine called Honey Bunch that showed this honeyed character in the wine because the grapes themselves got a little bit more sunshine. They came out a little bit golden, and when they pressed, the wine resulting from it was a bit more golden. I think you could get this expression perhaps by way of color from Chardonnay, but not necessarily that level of acidity. If you've gotten that much ripeness and we're getting these tropical characteristics in this yellow apple as opposed to green apple, you would lose some of that acidity. It would be richer and rounder, not quite as bright and vibrant. So that's where it leads you to sort of Chenin Blanc. Petit Manseng does the same thing. And if this was Petit Manseng, it'd be a very nice expression of that, where we're not full-blown pineapple, but there's some waxiness too here that I was trying to find earlier, and maybe just by virtue of me wanting to find it, there is some, but Chenin Blanc can also present typically some of that waxiness or a lanolin woolliness. Sarah's noting something perhaps from the Rhone, and we could absolutely be talking about something from the Rhone. I mean, maybe it's blend here where you're going to get Roussanne, Marsanne, Grenache, others. The high acidity could come perhaps from Grenache. Yeah, Dean, Robin, excuse me, the butteriness of the texture, not the butteriness necessarily of a flavor profile or an aroma. And when we say butteriness, or when you say that, I think you're referring to something in the way of a wine that generally would display butteriness, would have this kind of texture. It's got a richness to it. And generally speaking, a buttery or a wine that goes through malolactic fermentation oftentimes also sees some oak, oftentimes is also riper in expression and therefore has a richness. I'm not getting the buttery element here itself by way of flavor, but I am as you associate it with texture. There's a slight mintiness coming out now. Eucalyptus. It continues to change for sure, Curtis. I agree. There's a wonderful mid-palate volume. So it comes in, I think, quite robust. I mean, it comes in round, like you were trying to somehow eat a ping pong ball. There's just a roundness. It fills your mouth right away. And then it expands. And then it lingers, less so with flavor, but it lingers with acidity and structure, some of that alcohol. I wouldn't say it burns, but it's definitely weighty. And there's sort of a residual in the mouth, right? Like with nothing in my mouth now, it's still here. There's still a presence. It's all around the mouth. Much like kind of in a red wine where you have tannin that kind of lingers in your mouth. I wouldn't say this is necessarily tannic, but there's a drying sensation to it. There's been some skin contact to this that is expressive. I don't know that this is, an orange wine per se, where they've treated it like a red wine, where the wine juice pressed from the skins then is reintroduced or left on the skins to extract something. But I think there's a little bit of extraction here for some of that viscosity, that textural weight. Mm. So if we're talking about Petit Manseng as a potential grape, that's Virginia, that's Uruguay, that's southern France, but often not dry. Mm. If we're talking about Chenin Blanc, that's the Loire Valley in France for sure. That could be California, I suppose. I mean, not suppose, I know. There's some old vine Chenin Blanc in California. Chalone used to make some beautiful Chenin Blanc. There's Chenin Blanc in Washington State. There's Chenin Blanc, absolutely has been noted, in South Africa. And so those are kind of the prototypical spots you might think about Chenin Blanc. It grows other places too. It grows here in Virginia by a few producers, but I've never tasted it here with this level of ripeness and expression and weight. That's where I think the South African Chenin Blanc idea is a good call. Perhaps we should be talking about France. In France, in the Loire Valley, there are several appellations that are known to make Chenin Blanc. You could have kind of a broad kind of Loire Valley production from Touraine, kind of the larger region. You could have a focused production from Montlouis, which is on the south side of the river, or in Vouvray on the north, and it be a dry version. They make sec versions. Sec in French means dry. You could have it from a region called Savinière, and Savinière is almost always dry by way of its kind of orientation and how it has stylistically been made for 800, 900 years there, just as a dry kind of wine. Thank you, Natalie. Theo does have some Chenin planted. Yes, Nate Walsh has some planted up at Walsh Vineyards. Pouring some more. But I haven't had Theo's yet, which is kind of exciting. Ooh, this changed a massive amount, even in the bottle from my glass. I agree, Natalie, this is definitely not that. I don't think. And there's part of the game, of course, that that when we play this, you know, we're looking at the bottle shape, we're looking at the price point, and Savinière, generally speaking, would be difficult to find at this price point. I mean, if Julie did, that would be wonderful. So it could be from a Montlouis or a Vouvray spot that's dry, but this is very dry. South Africa makes what is kind of called Steen. Not so much anymore, but Steen was an old name for Chenin Blanc that was dry. They kind of pioneered the idea of a dry Chenin Blanc that way in the New World. That's changing, huh? There's more fruit now on the nose, or the same fruit, but it's more expressive. Dean and Bobbin's kind of tropical fruits there. The apple for me is still real present. That's when you get that yellowy apple, stewed apple, you've got a little bit of that lanolin note, that waxy note, the high acid. For me, this is going to be very difficult to call anything but Chenin Blanc. To the question of whether this could be a blend, potentially. But there seems to be sort of a purity to this that, not that blends don't have a purity, but when blends have this kind of symphony as opposed to a purity. White Rioja has a cool guess, a cool idea. Thank you, Natalie, for that. That's a neat idea. So Viura, we have a Viura by the glass right now that isn't quite as rich as this. It's a little bit more fresh. Grenache Blanc, yeah, with some oak potentially, but we're not seeing the same oak signature for this color. The acid, though, for sure, it's an expression. It doesn't read Italian, so maybe we're Spanish white, French Loire Valley Chenin, perhaps South African Chenin, perhaps an interesting expression of Petit Manseng here in Virginia. Semillon, I think, has an opportunity too, because when Semillon gets that kind of wonderful ripeness on the skin, you could get this there. Semillon from Australia, when we've tried it in the past, has always been a little bit more linear. It hasn't been quite so voluminous. It reads more like Sauvignon Blanc reads in terms of its texture, not this sort of richness. but maybe. There's Semillon in Argentina, more sun-kissed. That'd be very interesting, right? Hmm. So yes, Grenache, Semillon, Chenin Blanc, Petit Mustang, White Rioja, Viura. Gosh, that'd be kind of cool if it was that. But I don't remember the White Rioja, the very few. I mean, honestly, 10 or less in my lifetime for sure. Presenting sort of that real pronounced appley note, but I could be wrong. I like this wine quite a bit too, Dean and Bobbin. It's a lovely wine. It's a wine that has a little bit of versatility vis-a-vis reaching into spaces that you would otherwise look to maybe a red for or main course offering. That this could handle a pork situation for sure, and could handle grilled meats or grilled fishes, excuse me. Could handle something a bit more substantive, but then also could play quite comfortably with something with a little bit more brightness. So, I mean, you could have some really, like, say, a blue cheese salad with poached pears and things of that sort. It'd be lovely and kind of fun in this regard. Spiced and sweetened sugared nuts, something that has meatiness to it, richness in the way of the nuts or cheese. This would handle very well. Mm. White Tempranillo and Chardonnay. Fascinating idea. That would be very cool. I don't have any context for that necessarily by way of drawing from a personal memory, but that's awesome that you're getting that reference point from something you've tasted before, and that White Rioja giving you some richness. Very cool. We've been blind tasting each other here on a regular basis. And Kyle brought in yesterday, a Malbec, spelled Malbech, from the Veneto in Italy. No context for that, right? Couldn't place that type of wine. It drank to me like a cru Beaujolais. But having then Tempranillo and Chardonnay together, a blend, and Rioja, wonderful, fascinating. And those characteristics that we're finding here, the white Tempranillo that I've had a couple times, I don't recall it having as high acid as this, and blending that with the Chardonnay maybe would give it that lift. Certainly, I think that descriptor of those two grapes coming together is at least a viable option for what this is. Curtis, a little sour apple, not green, sour. Okay, fermented sour, or like an apple on its way towards souring. That's a neat idea. Yes. It's hard to peg this particular wine, old world, new world, and I think that's perhaps maybe one of the reasons why the Court of Master Sommeliers at this point is not necessarily continuing with that distinction. It's a wine that, slightly fermented, has that slightly fermented quality, which I think would take me to the old world, but it's not necessarily dominated by only old world profile. There's a cleanliness to the fruit expression that I'm not saying you can't have that expression in the old world, but by way of tells, usually when we're like fermented and sour apple, like we're headed old world. And then there's other elements about this that are clean and crisp and lovely. I don't pick up a whole bunch of oak, which could kind of take us back toward the old world. But then the style itself for Chenin Blanc isn't necessarily to be very oaked. I'm defaulting Chenin Blanc. Semillon could have oak and probably would if it was this ripe, with a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc, which could contribute some of that acidity. So a Bordeaux blend, a white Bordeaux blend, would be fascinating in this regard. I think you'd get a slightly different profile and not quite the same persistence of acidity and that soured fruit quality toward the finish. The White Rioja, as we talked about a little bit, could explain this. So Petit Mustang, we've mentioned a few times, and I don't know why I don't stay there. It could. If the pineapple was a little bit more reminiscent or representative here, a little more signature, I might be shifting that way. As a result, I'm not, because it is more apple to me than pineapple. It has a hint of it, but not enough to draw me away from Chenin Blanc. And so there's like a little bit of a lemon peel, the essence, lemon oil, slightly coming out now. That is another tell for me for Chenin Blanc. So where do you want to be? Where do you want to put yourselves, guys? Are you planting a flag anywhere particular? Final guess, final pour. I shouldn't say guess. Final conclusion based on thorough and rigorous evaluation. It's more flinty, minerally. Gosh, it's changed every single time. This may pull me back into the Loire itself. That flinty mineral. Yeah, Curtis, that's great. I mean, a really pleasant, beautiful, kind of more pedigreed white Bordeaux would be Semillon driven and had, let's say, 80 Semillon, 70 Semillon, 30 Sauvignon Blanc. I like that call very much. The bottle shape supports that call. Not that that should be what we're doing. The bottle shape doesn't necessarily support Chenin Blanc. Grave, perfect. So Dean and Curtis and Renee are all kind of Grave. So Grave being a region in Bordeaux, a region that's renowned for making this kind of more pedigreed, focused Semillon Sauvignon Blanc. All right, Tim wants to be put out of his misery, wants to know. Let's do this. I'm pausing for a second because that mineral flintiness is, and you guys saying Grave is really. So if we were like 80 Semillon, 20% Sauvignon Blanc, maybe that would give us this acidity. I'm gonna go with you. I'm gonna pivot. I was Chenin Blanc the whole way, but I'm gonna go for it. Yeah, I think Grave, Bordeaux, white Bordeaux. I like that call. More and more I do. So 2020. I don't think there was any real kind of indication of super age on this. So 3 to 5 years of age, white Bordeaux, Semillon oriented. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. Oh shit. That's fascinating. This is a Red Wolf Imports. Tip of the hat to the Wolves. This is from Portugal. This is Albarino or Alvarinho. Wow, 100% varietal. I didn't have Albarino on my radar whatsoever. No, you guys didn't leave me wrong at all. This is Portuguese Albarino. So presuming, so if you're in Spain and the little portion in Galicia that sticks out over the top of Portugal, if you go a little bit further south, you're in Portugal and they're growing Albarino in that part, why not continue to grow it as you head down further south? Really interesting. So Albarino presenting with that apple element riper, much riper. Very neat wine. Presenting like Semillon, presenting like Chenin Blanc, like the pear character that maybe I should have picked up. You know, sometimes you get pear. I do. I get pear a lot. With Albarino, and Albarino here had more. It's further south. Perhaps it's a little bit riper. Yeah, we don't get to say missed it by that much. We missed it by like that much, but we were in the right continent. I mean, at least I didn't say double down on Chenin Blanc from South Africa. Wow, it's a cool wine. How much is the alcohol on this? 12.5%. What it's saying. The flinty minerality kind of came out, sort of pushed its way back out at the last minute. So, yeah, this was a fun one, guys. I apologize for the technological difficulties, and we'll work on making sure that doesn't happen going forward. But I'm grateful for all of you to stick it out and at least we had great wine to enjoy along the way, and certainly one that we learned more about, I think, in the scope of the 4 years that we've been doing this now, the 200 plus times we've done this. I don't think we've ever had Alvarinho from Portugal, so that's very cool. Had a couple of recent tastings in the last several months that just illuminate what's going on in Portugal, and I know many people know that already, and it's not news, but finally the grapes are coming here, and the wines are coming this way, and what awesome wines! So, cheers to Julie for pulling that stuff. Nice choice indeed. Thank you, Dean, for noting that. You're welcome, Curtis, and everyone. Great pleasure to have you. We'll see you next time. Enjoy the rest of this bottle. I know I am. Thanks.